Hello everybody, I am Blue. I make Copper the Barn Owl, and I have quite a few questions that I've gotten from people on Instagram and Discord asking about the process behind Copper and if I have any tips or tricks for people who want to make art dolls, specifically that are avians, so if they have wings, but I've also gotten just questions in general on how I go about making art dolls. So I am going to be doing a series of FAQs. Don't mind the video. The video is just, I didn't want you guys to be bored. I figured you guys could have something to look at, so I made a niffler and recorded it. But so yeah, so I think I'm actually going to start with talking about materials, because I feel like sourcing materials is probably one of the major things that stops people from making art dolls. And so this might end up being a couple of videos on its own just because it's a lot to go over. And I know one of the videos in particular about fur, I really want to be able to show you examples of what I'm talking about. And I actually have quite a few swatches, so that one will be live video feed as I'm talking rather than recorded over video. So I think the first thing I wanted to go over is clay. A lot of people want to start art dolls by making the faces. I say the faces because the heads are, you don't make the whole head out of clay, and I think that's one of the big problems that new doll makers run into, is they try to make the entire head, and the entire head made out of solid clay or solid resin is going to be too heavy. I know that Kaypea Creations uses foil when she makes the head, so it makes it lighter. But one trick that I've found is to make the face instead and then use a little bit excess armature and go ahead and fill up the rest of the head using quilt batting, which is what you use to fluff up the armature basically. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I do suggest going and watching some of Kaypea Creations tutorials, because she goes over the whole process, and that was basically how I learned how to do it. But yes, so the clay though, back to the clay, sorry, this is gonna happen a lot. So I see a lot of people wanting to start off with something called air dry clay. Now if you have experience working with air dry, then this can actually work out rather well. However, air dry clay, apart from being rather difficult to work with since it's kind of brittle when it's dry and likes to crack unless you're making a very thick piece, in which case it's going to make for a really heavy face. It has the added difficulty of actually making you unable to take a mold of it. Like, if you want to use silicone to take a mold of a really nice face, you couldn't. A lot of the air dry clays that are on the market have additives in them that inhibits the cure of silicone. So you can pour the silicone on the face and you're going to end up with a really goopy face. And so that just destroys the work that you've done. So one of the clays that I wanted to talk about is actually called Monster Clay, which is what I'm working with here. I made this niffler face with the intent of casting it in silicone. Monster Clay is really nice for a couple of different reasons. It is reusable almost infinitely, unless you really mess up your clay, like by mixing a bunch of fur into it, #ArtDollProblems, or, you know, you let it get really too dry and you're unable to mix coconut oil back into it, which I've yet to have this problem, honestly. It's really reusable, and it takes fine detail really well. Whereas with something like air dry clay or foam clay, you're gonna have issues with getting it to keep detail. Like you'll carve into it and it'll pop back up because, hey, it has foam in it. Now, if you're wanting to do an art doll that's just a one-off sculpt where it's going to be completely one of a kind, it's never going to be reused for another art doll, then you're going to be looking into Sculpey #1 probably. I have some experience with Sculpey and it isn't great, and I'm going to go as far as to say that a lot of art doll makers actually don't recommend using Sculpey. We've found other things that we prefer to use instead. Sculpey just ends up being kind of brittle out of the oven. It's really expensive to get, and I can't personally recommend it, although it could work. I feel like that's like a warning. Like, it could work, but I'm not recommending it. There's other brands called Premo and Finval, which are polymer clays, so when they're baked in the oven, just like Sculpey, they are hard coming out of it. And those two clays are nice to work with. They take a little bit more conditioning, like working them to get to the soft point where they can then be sculpted into. I think my personal favorite currently is a clay called Cosclay Sculpt, which is actually somewhat bendable, not soft, but posable after it's been baked. I know a couple of people who actually will mix different ratios of cosclay and Premo or Finval together to make their own particular mix that they prefer to use. So it's really just going to come down to personal preference. I don't know if Sculpey can be mixed with the others. I just know that in the community that I'm in, that's what we tend to prefer. Let's see, what other materials do we have? I think the next part that I was going to talk about is actually silicones and resins. Just because those are 3 questions that I get a lot in combination. Is what clay do I use, what silicone do I use, and what resin do I use? So for faces and sometimes feet, the resin that I use is called Smooth Cast 300. This is also the same resin that Kaypea uses. Kaypea Creations uses. And I also use the same brand in silicone, which is Smooth On EcoFlex, I believe it's called. Yeah, Smooth On EcoFlex. I prefer to stick to Smooth On simply because I actually have a really good rapport with their technical support. Every time I've called with a question about like mixing this kind of silicone with this kind of resin, or if certain paints will work on silicones, they've always been more than willing to try things out if they didn't have the answer right away, which I feel like is really nice to have in customer support. Just someone that you can call and ask questions and they'll be like, I don't know, but I can find out. That's not often found nowadays. So there's different kinds of resin. So the resin that I mentioned, Smooth Cast 300, is a white resin when it's finished. It's 2-part, and you mix it and it cures together like within 5 minutes. So that's the kind of resin that you want to use for your faces and paws. Now, if you wanted a resin that is clear, then you want to go for something most likely called a deep cast resin, which is an art kind of resin. You'll see it using like paint drop sculptures and stuff like that, or water drop sculptures, that's what they're called, sorry. And then there's another kind of resin called UV resin, which you might have guessed cures with a UV lamp, or UV light, or under the sun. Now, UV resin is really nice because it gives you a very immediate clear resin. So if you wanted to do anything like a lake or a waterfall, or it could even be used to make cabochon eyes, UV resin is the way to go because it's a much quicker cure. If it's something that you can wait a little bit for the resin to cure, it's much cheaper to get the deep cast resin than it is to get the UV resin. UV resin usually comes in small bottles and it's not very cheap, so keep that in mind. The other kind of silicone that I've actually used is also by Smooth On, and it's called Dragon Skin Soft. Dragon Skin is good for if you're just doing like a general face mold. Anything where you're gonna try to cast the head and not just the face, you're gonna want to use EcoFlex because you want to be able to pull the mold apart to get it out. And with EcoFlex, you don't need to cut the mold to get most things out. But if you're using just for the face, then Dragon Skin can also work. I think I'm actually going to call this video here just because I really want people to be able to find the specific things that they want to hear about. So if you're interested in any of the future series, I don't even think that's a word. If you're interested in future videos on how-tos for dolls, just subscribe. You know, if you have a particular question that you want answered, leave a comment below and I will do my best to answer it in the upcoming series, or if not, I'll make a separate video for it. I have a lot of different art doll creators at my fingertips through the Discord community, and just the community in general. So I can, if I don't know the answer, I can always ask them. So for future videos, we're going to be talking about fur types, how to get realistic eyes without doing the print off and UV resin eyes. We're going to talk about feather making because honestly it's close to my heart. I do lots of feather making. Not necessarily making, but feather shaping using real feathers and then painting them. Did I already say fur? I'm sure I already said fur. I also wanted to do some videos on doing body parts, like how to do wings, claws, ears, head, and then also tool upkeep, because I've actually found a couple things that I know were issues for me, and so I figured they were issues for other people, and they ended up being issues for other people, like how to keep your animal brush clean when you're constantly running it through wet paint. It's a problem. People don't think about it before they start doing it. Another thing that I've seen is people complain a lot about the fur flying everywhere, and so I actually have a couple tips on how to limit that as well. At least tips on how to keep yourself from wearing it. So yeah, if you're interested in any of those things, subscribe and I'll see you in future videos.